Hello besties, my name's Mina. Welcome to my channel, Mina Reads, and today we're going to be talking about the beginning of my 2025 reading year. So these are all the books that I read in January. Also going to give you some brief updates on my reading goals. So I guess I can actually give you the reading goal updates because it's a pretty short update. So one of my goals is that I want to read more of the arcs that are on my NetGalley shelf. I have many overdue arcs as well as some 2025 arcs that I'm working my way through, and so the month of January I did read 2 arcs that were on my NetGalley shelf. I want to read more classics this year, and this month I read 3 books that I believe can be considered classics. I also have a huge list of 25 books that I want to read in 2025. You can check that video out in the link in my description below. And I read 1 of the books on my 2025 list. So that's where we are with that. So I haven't made a lot of progress, but a little progress. And slow motion is still motion. So we're doing it. We're getting it done. And I'm very proud of myself. Also, this was just a really good beginning of my reading month in terms of, yes, making a little bit of progress on most of my reading goals so far, but also it was just really good in terms of quality. I had a lot of reads that I really enjoyed, and it just was like a fun reading month. So I'm very excited to share these books with you. I hope that the beginning of your 2025 reading year is going well. Please let me know in the comments below what was the best book that you read in January. I'd love to hear all about it. And let's get into these reviews. So the first book that I read was When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. And this is a urban fantasy novella that was so good. It's the start in a series. This series is called the Curse Breaker series, and I believe the second book will be coming out in like September 2025. But oh my god, this was so good, you guys. So this is about like this supernatural monster hunter, Dimitri, who is trying to navigate his way through the supernatural underground because he has some business with Baba Yaga and he's trying to find her. So he ends up enlisting the help of this girl named Alia, who's a Zamora, and this involves a lot of Slavic mythology and mythological creatures. And so there are the Zamora, Striga, there are some other creatures introduced as well, and I'm not really well versed in Slavic mythology, so learning about all the different monsters was like really fun and entertaining. And I just think that if you enjoy urban fantasy, and if you've enjoyed like Olivia Blake's recent books, like if you enjoyed One for My Enemy, or if you enjoyed Masters of Death, I think you would really enjoy this in terms of like the world building and the setting that it has. A very well developed novella, and even though it was under 200 pages, it might have only been like 130 pages at most, it still felt like a really well developed story, and I was super invested in the characters and in their dynamics and in their motivations. Like, I just think it was so well done, so I would highly recommend checking it out, and I'm very excited for the second book in that series to come out in September. So I gave that book 4 stars. I would also really recommend the audiobook because the narrator's accent work is really good. My next reads, I ended up reading 3 volumes of Sign of Affection. So Sign of Affection is a romance manga about these 2 characters, Yuki and Itsuyomi. Yuki is a young deaf woman who is in her first year of college, I believe, and this is kind of about her having a chance encounter with this 3rd-year student, Itsuyomi, and he is a polyglot. He really loves learning new languages, and when he meets her and he finds out that she is deaf, he's very interested in learning sign language because he wants to be able to communicate with her. And so this is about her sort of becoming his sign language tutor, and over the course of that, them falling in love. And each volume is just seeing more and more of their love story as they're like, you know, building a relationship. And the 3 volumes that I read volume 8, volume 9, and volume 10, we are seeing them as a firmly established couple, and they're like making major relationship milestones and getting closer, like meeting the family and all that kind of stuff. And it was just very good, very sweet. It's a very cute series. I really love Yuki and Itsuyomi's connection. Itsuyomi is just like the book boyfriend of all time. Like, he's so cute and wonderful and amazing. So I gave volume 8 a 4 star. I gave volume 9 a 3 star. Volume 9 was just sort of a filler volume in the midst of like some bigger plot things that were going on. So I didn't love it that much, but like it was fine. And then I gave volume 10 4 stars. So like I said, they were all good installments in a series that I enjoy with characters that I really like and I'm very invested in. I will be continuing to read the series. It was a really good reading experience. After that, I read Maurice by E.M. Forster. This is a queer classic. So this is set during the Edwardian period. This is a story that follows our titular character Maurice as he is growing up as a young gay man in Edwardian society, and we're following him through college. And in college he meets this other man named Clive, who sort of is his gay awakening, and we're following some of their love story and their journey together, as well as another partner in Maurice's life. And this book was just so good. I absolutely adored E.M. Forster's writing. This was my first time reading a book by him, and it was just so phenomenally written. Like, I truly loved it so deeply. And Maurice is a very complicated character. Like, he's sort of an asshole sometimes, and I've talked about this a million times. I love complicated characters. I think the more complicated, complex, and maybe unlikable a character is in some aspects of their life, make me more interested in them, more invested in their narrative. And I just thought that Maurice was a very like complicated dude, and in some ways I really loved him, and in other ways I thought he was a jerk. And I think that that made for a really interesting reading experience. And his relationship with Clive was so, it was just so moving. And there's some ambiguous parts of the story. I don't really want to like spoil things for you, but there are some parts of the novel that are really ambiguous, and I think that there are some people who will hate that ambiguity, but I think that the ambiguity is realistic. It's very human, and I think it especially makes sense given the time period that these men are growing up in and living in, and it just makes sense for the environment that they're finding themselves in as they're navigating their queerness. And it just was so, it was just so good. It was so phenomenal. I loved everything about it. This was my first 5-star of the year. I just like literally everything about it just worked for me. It was perfect for me. And there's this one quote that I literally cannot stop thinking about. It like had me on my knees, emotional as fuck. And it's a scene near like the end of the book. And Maurice says, "You care for me a little bit, I do think," he admitted, "but I can't hang all my life on a little bit." And I really love the way this book talks about navigating, like, are you going to chase after what you want? Are you going to embrace the wholeness of who you are? Are you going to hide certain aspects of yourself just to fit into society's mold? I think that this book just really navigates like gender, class, sexuality in such interesting ways. And I love the way that Maurice is so invested in being his whole self, no matter what the cost may be. And I just loved it. Like, it was just so gorgeous, so absolutely gorgeous and stunning, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, like I said. It was just so good. It was so good to me, and it was just beyond beautiful. I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but you absolutely should read it. It was phenomenal. Let's talk about something else. So after reading that, I was reading Junky by William Burroughs, and he is a Beat Generation author, but I heard a lot about his work when I was in my English degree in college, but I had never read anything by him, and I knew that he was a queer author who was very influential in that like literary period in the 50s, 60s, and so I was like, okay, like I'm gonna read something from him. And so I read Junky, and Junky is sort of the pretext to Queer, which recently was adapted into a film that I really enjoyed. So I wanted to read Junky, and I read it. It's a really short novella. It's not too long, but it is about this character named William Lee, who is a stand-in for William Burroughs himself, and it's about his experience with becoming a drug addict and his drug habit. And it really just chronicles the habit, like in the day-to-day, what he's doing to get his fix, how he's using, what he's using, the cycles of getting clean and then relapsing. I don't really know how to rate this book. I thought that it was very interestingly written, because even though the character is using drugs and it's clearly a very like tragic downward spiral of a life, the character William Lee, and the way that he describes everything that he's doing and experiencing, he says it in such like a deadpan and emotionless way that it almost normalizes everything that he's doing, to the point where it just sounds like somebody sort of reciting their grocery list. I think one of the most striking parts about the book is the fact that our main character William is married the whole time, though he doesn't necessarily tell us about the fact that he's married until it takes him a long time to mention that he's married. And I don't think this is a spoiler, because if you read the introduction, you're gonna know his character's married. But he's married. He almost never mentions his wife or his children, but he's always mentioning the people are in his life who are enabling his habit, who he's using with, who he's buying from, who he's selling to. And so it really like exemplifies how his life has boiled down so specifically to his heroin habit, the effect that opioids are having on his life. Like that's the only thing that matters to him, and his family is like background noise to the main event of his life, which is using. And I think that the way that that was kind of represented was very interesting to me. So I think that I'm seeing a lot in terms of the writing that I enjoyed, or that I'm very impressed by, but I just don't know how to rate it. I think maybe I'll come back to it in terms of giving it a rating after I read Queer, which, like I said, is also about the character William Lee a little bit later in his life. And maybe after I read that one, I'll know more of how I want to rate it. But it was a very interesting reading experience for sure. So then I read Seeing Red by Sean, just because I needed a change of pace. I wanted something fun, light, fluffy, and sexy after reading the very intense and very sad chronicling of that character's life. And so this book, Seeing Red, is about a character named True. It's about a character named True. True has recently lost her twin sister, and she is still grieving her. And in the midst of her grief, she has also fallen into like a writing slump. That's not what they call it. Writer's block. She has really intense writer's block, and she's an author. She's trying to write her next book, and so she decides that she needs a change of scenery. She leaves the city and she goes to the mountains. And so while she's in the mountains, she has these neighbors named Noah and Grayson, and this is a story about her falling in love with both of them, and both of them falling in love with her, and all that good stuff. It was really sweet, and I enjoyed it. It was cute, it was sweet, it was sexy. I do feel like it was very similar to the first book in the series, and so it just felt like well-trodden ground. Like it didn't really do anything new and exciting necessarily for me, but I did think that it was cute. So I gave it 3 stars, maybe like a 3.5. It was good. I would recommend it. It was a wonderful palate cleanser for me, and like I had a good time reading it, but it just didn't completely wow me. And so I think I enjoyed the first book in this series a little bit more. I know I gave that one 4 stars, but I would still recommend both, especially if you're looking for a sweet like black poly throuple book. Like why not? It's definitely a good time. So yeah, I read that one. After reading that, I read Swordcrossed. I do have a reading vlog where I talk about this. I will leave that link in the description if you're interested. But I read Swordcrossed by Freya Marske. This is a standalone fantasy romance, and we're following this character named Matanesh J. And Matanesh is the head of his household. They're doing horribly financially, and so Matanesh is finding himself in this arranged marriage that's going to help his family's economic standing. And so Maddie is all set to be married to this amazing young woman who is fabulously wealthy, and the only thing that is impeding his potential wedding to her is the fact that she has another suitor, not one that she's very interested in, but someone who is very interested in pursuing her, and he has the ability to stop their wedding if he so chooses by challenging. So you know when someone kind of crashes in and says I object. So in this world people can do that, but when they say I object, they are literally fighting for the woman's hand. And so Maddie is in the position where he has to hire a duelist to be his best man to you know, help him protect the sanctity of his wedding, so that it will actually go through. So he ends up hiring a best man. His best man's name is Luca. Luca is a con man. There are some circumstances that lead to him and Luca's business arrangement, and this is about Luca and Maddie falling in love when they're supposed to be preparing for this epic duel for Maddie's fiance's hand. I enjoy historical fantasy a lot, and I just thought that Maddie and Luca, they had such amazing chemistry, and this book was so juicy. It was so messy. It was so complicated but beautiful. I love the side characters a whole lot. Sophia, Maddie's fiance, she was a really great character. Maya, Maddie's sister, was also an awesome character. I just thought this was really fun. It was really messy, and I just enjoyed it. Like if you love mess, you love drama, and you love books that have like really heavy sexual tension, you should read this, because the vibes between Maddie and Luca were like so crazy. Genuinely was so crazy. I wasn't expecting it. I would highly recommend it if that's your vibe. Was Maddie a little bit ghetto and a little bit wrong for the way he carried on in this book? Yes, but I enjoyed it. So I gave the book 4 stars. Fantastic. Highly recommend it. All right, and so after reading that, oops, this is the wrong book. So after that, I did read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This book was the first read in the Middle-earth along that I am doing with my bestie Erin from Booked and Busy, as well as Gavin from Gavin Reads It All, Leanne from Leanne's Library, Darian from Darian the Librarian, and Tammy from Tammy Tries to Read. It was a big hit for me, at least. This was my first time reading The Hobbit. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. If you're unfamiliar with The Hobbit, which seems kind of crazy, but if you happen to be, this is a story about Bilbo Baggins. Hobbits are teeny tiny little people who live a peaceful life in a place called the Shire, and they live a very insular, comfy life, and they're not very interested in the troubles of man. Bilbo is approached by the wizard Gandalf to be a burglar on this adventure with 13 dwarves as they attempt to take back their ancestral home from this dragon named Smaug. So this is about their adventure, their travels, as they get into a lot of hijinks with different creatures like orcs, trolls, elves, the dragon, Smeagol, Gollum, one of my favorite characters in all of fantasy fiction. I really enjoyed this. I love the writing style. I would definitely recommend it on audio if you can, because Andy Serkis narrates it and his narration is really fantastic. But yeah, like, it was just a really fun reading experience. I really loved Bilbo as a character. Like, he was so hilarious to me, and he is so smart, and I really love smart characters. And I love reading about characters who are heavily underestimated, who end up being total badasses, and that's who Bilbo was in this. So I really liked him. He was a very interesting character, and he was also so realistic. Like, he was constantly complaining on their adventure about how hungry he was, and how tired he was, and how cold he was, and that would be me. If I was on some dangerous, perilous adventure in the middle of nowhere, like eating hard bread and cheese for months on end, I too would be complaining. So he was real. He was beyond real for that. And I really loved him. So I enjoyed this book. I will also leave a link to our Hobbit discussion if you're interested in our thoughts on it. But it was a really fun time. I'm excited to read and discuss Fellowship of the Ring with everyone in February. And yeah, good times were had by all. And the last book that I read in January was But Not Too Bold. So, But Not Too Bold is translated fiction. I believe it's been translated from Portuguese. Our main character Delilah works at Capricious House, and this house is owned by this spider woman named Anthema. And Anthema is anthropomorphized spider woman, sort of. She's mostly a spider, but she can appear slightly more human if she so chooses, but mostly she doesn't. And she's just a giant spider lady who's very, very strange and very creepy, and has a lust and a hunger for beautiful women. So she has a constant string of beautiful brides being brought to her so that she can woo them and marry them. And typically once they find out that she is a giant creepy spider, they're prone to running away in terror, and while they do so, she likes to eat them. And so she has this whole household that takes care of her and that runs things, and sometimes she occasionally eats her employees as well if they get on her nerves. So she has these brides, and even though she has a tendency to eat them, she does still love them, so she says. And because she loves them, she makes these, like, she makes memorabilia so that she can always remember them, and this memorabilia is very important to her. She keeps it locked away. And one day, some of the memorabilia has been stolen, and so she accuses her previous keeper of the keys for having stolen them. And our main character, Delilah, comes in as the replacement keeper of the keys, who becomes very close to Anthema as they try to solve the mystery of who stole these items. But it was very strange. It was very bizarre. I liked it. I think it could have been a little bit weirder. Like, I think it was just on the edge of being like really amazing horror, and it's also kind of a romance in a way. And I think that it could have benefited from being just a teeny tiny bit more strange and more gross, and then I probably would have given it 5 stars. But I gave it a 3.5 instead. It was very interesting. It was very creepy. Anthema, in the way that her bodily movements and everything that were described, was so creepy. Like, it was just like, it was interesting. It was creepy. I liked it. I think it could have been more fucked up, maybe. Just a little bit. Just a tad. and then I would have really loved it. I would definitely not recommend this book if you have arachnophobia at all, because it's like, it's so detailed with the spider stuff. Like, you will be sick to your stomach. You will have nightmares about it. I definitely have a fear of spiders, so I'm not really sure why I chose to read it. But I was told that it was like a sexy spider situation, and because I have such a fear of spiders, I was like, okay, like, maybe if I sexualize the fear, I won't be afraid of it anymore. And you know what? I kind of think it worked. So there's that. It was weird. I think it could have been weirder. And that's my review. 3.5 stars. That's all the books that I read in January. I'm excited for February. I'm planning to read lots of books by Black authors, lots of romance. Hopefully it's going to be an amazing reading month, and I will see you all in my next wrap up. Be sure in the comments to let me know what you read in January, what you loved in January, what you hated in January. Let me know all the tea in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video, babes. So bye! Mwah.